Today we will be discussing the Indian philosophical system and the Indian religious cults and the influence of Shakti cult on the whole system. Now, as it is well known that in the Indian philosophical system there were 6 systems altogether, that's why it is known as Shadadarshan, starting from Mimamsa, ultimately going into the Vedantic system. Now, generally, it is the discussion on the philosophical intricacies that one is generally familiar with. But another story, relatively unaddressed, is the influence of Shakti cult on the whole system as well as the religious cults, particularly all the religions like Jainism, Buddhism, then Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and ultimately Shaktiism itself. How this was shaping up, particularly during this period between say 600 AD to 1200 AD, which will be our main temporal space that we will be dealing upon.
Excuse me, sir. Can one find this cult of Shakti in Buddhism also?
Right. This will be a very important aspect which we can ponder upon, because originally Gautama Buddha or Tathagata, he was arguing for a kind of situation where though there is a transmigration, karma is the ultimate goal. It is one's karma which leads to the transmigration, and if one performs the right deeds, ultimately one can extricate himself or herself from this transmigration of life. But basically, he was against the concept of soul. That's why it is Niratmavadi, and it is a kind of atheist religion, a very peculiar kind of religion where the role of God is not very important. It is an individual who is performing some deeds through which one will extricate oneself out from this mundane world. Now, this was the original position of Hinayan, the lesser vehicle. But by, say, 2nd or 3rd century AD, there was a transmutation, or you can say a complete mutation of the original principle, and in the Mahayana, that is the greater vehicle, the propounders of this philosophy, it was not only a division of organization, but it was very important debate on the esoteric principles on the basis of which Buddhism stands. There, in Mahayana principle, we find a new concept coming, that is of Bodhisattva. If Buddha is so compassionate that he has left his own family and trying to find answer for the sufferings of the humankind, and not only humankind, the whole world, how can he be so selfish that he attains nirvana and goes out of this mundane world once and for all? So the concept of Bodhisattva comes, who has the capability of transcending this mundane world, but comes again and again till the date when the last person, or the last, not only the human being, the whole world is liberated from this misery. And with this concept of Bodhisattva, there were other changes taking place which was bringing the esoteric world and the mundane world together, where we find the tantric principle or the Shaktic principle, the female creative principle, becoming very important even for the Buddhist philosophy, how it was taking place. Now, in Mahayana, they were first arguing about, completely against the original impulses, that this world is a total void. It is shunya. The mundane world, it is a kind of impermanent one, and not only impermanent, it is actually unreal world. What is real? That is a Buddha, who is co-eternal, co-evil, who is everywhere present, and he is not a human being. He is a kind of ethereal one. who is present everywhere. Now from him comes the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, and every Dhyani Buddha has one Bodhisattva and a female creative principle, mainly in the form of Tara, who will come together, and in this coming together, a kind of copulation, a kind of sexual act, they will create the world. So in this manner, we find a total transmutation of the original Buddhist principle, and they were coming, at least in the Mahayana phase, they were coming closer to the absorption of tantric ideas. But this is not the end. This is actually the beginning, and it is happening around, say, 3rd, 4th century AD. Actually, every Mahayanist aspired to be a Bodhisattva, but not everybody was capable of reaching that point. Several Bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvar and then Maitreya, who will come, a kind of concept like the Kalki avatar, they had a consort, a female consort. For instance, Avalokiteshvar, who is actually the embodiment of compassion, he will be having Tara as the female consort. Then Manjushri, who is the personification of wisdom, he is having a consort either Lakshmi or Saraswati or both. So in this manner, even within the Mahayana fold, slowly there was a convergence towards absorption of the female creative principle that we called Shakti. Now, in the next phase, because they were continuously arguing with the Indian or the Hindu counterparts, they were also changing their own position, the Hindu philosophical systems as well as the religious cults. And with this change, we find by 10th, 11th century, the thunderbolt vehicle known as Vajrayan, they have come up. What was their argument? They were arguing that there are two principles, that is the male principle and the female principle. Say Upaya is the male principle, and say Karuna, which is the female principle. And if they come together, the world is created. In this thunderbolt vehicle, they are bringing in the imagery of sexual union, copulation, and which is now very prevalent in the Tibetan Buddhism. There, this female creative principle becomes much more predominant. Next stage, the locale was mainly in Bengal. The texts were Manjushri Mulakalpa or Gujja Samaj. These kind of texts are not available for the next development in Buddhist philosophy of the absorption of Shakti principle, that is the Sahajiyan, the easier vehicle, who argue that no kind of penance will bring you closer to the ultimate absolute truth. It is an easy life and a kind of joint bonding between a male and female in a real term, and this will ultimately lead to the ultimate bliss, that is nirvana. And this was taking place in the eastern part of India, and in this manner we find that the Shaktic principle came into the Buddhist philosophy, which was basically a kind of atheistic philosophy, ultimately transformed itself completely and became a kind of not only theistic one, but where the Shakti principle became very, very predominant. As I was talking about the Buddhist absorption of the Tantric principle or the Shaktic principle, we find the goddess or goddesses, they are becoming more and more important in the Buddhist philosophy as well as the cult.
Excuse me, sir. Do we find any influence of Shakti cult on Jainism as well?
It was there, but unlike Buddhism, where in the later part it becomes very, very predominant, Jains had a kind of a fleeting encounter with Shakti principle. For instance, in Khandagiri, Odisha, if you go through the caves, you find a particular cave where the figures of the jinas, they are given, 7 jinas, as well as in the lower panel, 7 goddesses, the quintessential Shaptamatrika, they are also found. Or in the same cave, there is a panel where the 24 Tirthankaras are there, then 24 kind of female consorts, they are also present. So, we find in this manner, some of the Indian goddesses, they were being absorbed in the Jain pantheon. Another very important instance that I will give. Earlier, the Jain religion was very dominant. In the earlier part of the Christian era, it was dominant in, say, Kalinga. In Bolobhi, the second council takes place where the codification of the Jain canons were taking place. Then in Deccan as well as South. And many of the major South Indian kings, for instance, Pallava king, he was a Jain who was converted by a Nayanar, Shaivite saint poet, Appar, and then Samandar, another saint poet, very important one. He is converting the Pandyan king who was a Jain earlier. So the Jains were there, but they could not face the onslaught of the resurgent Bhakti philosophy, at least what we find in South. And now they were all taking refuge in Karnataka, where the western Gangas were a great votary of Jain philosophy. So they were shifting their location from the deep south, they were coming to the middle part of the South Indian peninsula. As well as we find that they were trying to now absorb some of the goddesses, for instance Padmavati or Jain Ambika. Jain Ambika figure becomes very popular in West Bengal, and you find a many-headed hydra-faced Jina, and this god or the goddess behind him, they become a very important motif in the locality in West Bengal. There are many places, for instance in Bardhaman there is a place called Ambika Kalna. So the place names also show that this figure, Ambika, which was adopted by the Jains, and Jains had a considerable presence in Bengal also, they were becoming very important. It may be because of the onslaught that they were facing from the resurgent bhakti that they were changing it. But I would say that unlike Buddhism, this encounter was much more fleeting in its nature. It did not change the basic tenet of the philosophy very much. We can take the case of Vaishnavism, another very important aspect, very important segment of the Indian religious field or religious thinking, religious cult. There also we find that the absorption of this female creative principle was taking place. In historical field, we find that from the early Gupta period itself, icons like Lakshmi, Shri, they are becoming important. Earlier also they were there. The word Rajya Lakshmi, the guardian angel of the kings, are important. But now, even in the iconography, they were becoming important. And the coming together of the male and female principle, for instance, the Ardhanarishwar, we find in a Gupta seal found from Bhita, where this motif is there. Ardhanarishwar, one part it is Shiva, another part Parvati. In the same body, the male and female principle, they are coming together. And not only this one, there were other instances just after that, after the Gupta period, in the subsequent, say, in the Harsha's period, Banabhatta's writings, then other works, the Puranas, Markandeya Puran. A part is Devi Mahatmya. In Devi Mahatmya, they are talking about different types of goddesses. One very important goddess, a very benign figure, is Lakshmi or Shri, who is the divine consort of Vishnu. The Vaishnavite saint poets, they were known as the Alvars. And among the Alvars, 12 main Alvars, we find only one female composer, Randal. And there we can say she is talking about a kind of bridal mysticism. She is viewing herself as the consort of God, who has exchanged her garland with the God. That is, sacred marriage has taken place between them. Now, in Andal's writing, the kind of imagery that she is using, it shows a kind of bridal mysticism which later will take the form of the concept of Radha, the divine consort of Krishna. So the seeds were there, but later it came into a full-fledged philosophical system when it was handled by Ramanuja in a particular fashion. Again, the question will come that how Shaivites, they were changing themselves. There we find that starting from Mahabharata itself, reference is there to Daksha Yajna. Daksha, he is organizing a grand sacrifice. He has several daughters, of which one is married to Shiva. But Shiva, because of his uncouth type of nature, he is not a very welcome in the household of Daksha, who actually forgets or deliberately does not send an invitation to Shiva. And when his wife finds the humiliation meted to Shiva, she actually sacrifices her life. And Shiva becomes a kind of mad person, carrying the corpse of his dead wife along with him. He is roaming around like a mad person. And when Vishnu finds this, ultimately realizes that it will ultimately lead to the death of Shiva, he, with his Sudarshana Chakra, cuts the pieces of Sati's body into different parts, and these parts fall in different places. And where these body parts fall, they all becomes Shakti Pithas, 51 Shakti Pithas all over India. Some of them, they are situated in Bengal also. The story is there in Mahabharata. Later it is developed a bit further in, Puranas. Even in the creative literature, for instance, Kumar Sambhava, there the birth of Kumara, that is son of Shiva and Parvati, it is described. So Shiva, he is having a blissful married life where Parvati is the benign wife, that is also there. And in this manner, from the very beginning, we have the reference of the creative principle, Shakti cult, coming within Shaivism. But later, it is not just the benign feature of the Shakti cult, but the fierce manifestation of Durga, Mahishasura Mardini, we find in not only the literature, but the sculptural depiction of these kind of features or motifs we find in the extant cave sculptures. For instance, in Mahabalipuram, you have the scene where Durga is fighting with Mahishasur. And here the important change takes place, because in Buddhism, Jainism, Vaishnavism and Shaivism, all they have adopted the female creative principle, but as the minor one. God, he is immanent, he is present everywhere, but he is a reluctant participant, where the creation is taking place because of the creative impulse of the female principle, that is Shakti. But there also we can say it is a kind of dependent Shaktism. In Shaivism we find that kind of dependent Shaktism, but obviously it was much more pronounced. The role of the female creation which was much more pronounced in Shaivism compared to Vaishnavism. But in Shaktism, in Devi Mahatmya, it is described that it is not only the female god Shakti, Adya Shakti, that is the primal force. She has not only created all the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar, but then after creating these three godheads, who are the creator, upholder and the destroyer of the whole world, but she then divides her own self into three parts and allows them to mate with these three, that is Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwar, and ultimately because of this union the world is created. So here in the Shakti principle, Shakti cult, the goddess, she is not only an important partner, but actually she is the progenitor of the whole creation. And in this manner we find that in Shaktism she becomes the ultimate reality.
Excuse me, sir. Why did this assimilation of the female goddess to Hindu pantheon take place?
When the invention of agriculture takes place, shows that from the very beginning human beings, they have thought about the creative principle, how this nature is being created, and then taking the real life experience from their own, they have found that the female principle is very important for the creation, because she is the person who is giving birth to the next generation. In all the agricultural societies, be it Egypt, be it Mesopotamia, be it Harappa, everywhere we find that the female principle was there. In Harappa you have a seal with which the historians of Indian philosophy and religion has found a close affinity with the goddess of Shakumbhari, where a godhead, female godhead, she is lying upside down and plant is coming out from her womb. She is giving birth to a plant. Now, apart from this seal, you have other sources to show that the female goddesses among the aborigines, among the agricultural communities, they were very, very important. Indian major philosophical systems as well as the religions, they had to, at some point of time, had to have a kind of encounter with this widespread belief of the female creative principle, which was present at the grassroots level. And this was actually taking place at different points of time. In this manner, we find that Shaktism or Tantricism, it is not very separate one. It was there. Now, it was a kind of undercurrent. The female creative principle, which was a kind of undercurrent, which was a kind of secret fertility cult prevalent among the people, it found its way into the Indian philosophy and Indian religion, and which remains a very important facet, though relatively unaddressed. Thank you.